Let's get started. So, hi everybody. Thanks for joining this session. I'm Mahashri, Product Marketing Specialist at Unstract and also your host for this webinar today. Now, in this session, we're going to be tapping into a space that is very happening right at the cutting edge and could potentially revolutionize the way businesses are being done. So, this is also where the large language models today are heading and could be considered as the next milestone. And what I'm talking about is model context protocols, or MCPs. So in this webinar, we'll take a look at the advent of MCPs, their specific implications in document processing and automation, and how Unstract can be enabled in MCP environments. I'd also like to note that this is a beginner-friendly webinar. So whether you're hearing about MCPs for the first time or you've already tried them out, we've tried to design this session so as to provide value to everybody walking through. So here's the agenda for today. We'll start with MCP basics, that is, what are MCPs, how they work, and where they are headed. Following this, we'll move on to discussing MCP implications in document processing and automation, how they fit in, where do they come to use, and all that. And then we'll dive into an in-depth demo of the Unstract MCP Server and how this actually works using a real-world use case. And finally, in case we have any questions remaining, we'll also be venturing into a Q&A segment where one of our experts will be on air to answer your questions live. So that said, before I get started, here are a few session essentials or ground rules I'd like to set before we continue into this session. So firstly, all attendees in this webinar will automatically be on mute. In case you have any questions, please do drop them in the Q&A tab that you'll find in the bottom panel of your screen. One of us from the team will be able to get back to you with the answers via text. Now, you can also interact with fellow attendees using the chat tab. This is also where you let us know in case you run into any technical difficulties during this webinar. And as a final point, when you exit this session, you'll be redirected to a feedback form where I request you to leave a review on. So that said, let's start with the big question. What exactly are MCPs? Now, to answer that, let's rewind a little. So large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini have been around only for a few years, but they've already transformed how we get things done. So with their core functions like question answering, reasoning, natural language understanding, summarization, and the list that you have here, they've made it possible to complete many tasks much faster and more efficiently using just a simple prompt. So whether you're a marketer generating a quick email draft, a student asking for maybe easy dinner recipes, or a developer seeking help with code, LLMs are becoming everyday assistants for almost everybody. But here's the catch. Despite their power, most of these interactions with LLMs still follow a very basic pattern, which is you prompt, the model responds, and then you take it from there. This means that the response that the model gives you basically solves a specific part of your task, which you'll eventually have to take and plug it into somewhere else in order to complete the end-to-end task that you have in hand. So what if we are actually able to transcend this nature and go into a mode where the model doesn't just give you a response, but also performs action so as to complete the task faster? And that is what we are really trying to do with model context protocols. So to understand this better, let me take the example of a marketer wanting to send out an email. So this is probably how the workflow would look. So they would first write the email, choose a contact list to send that email to, and also schedule that email on a campaign tool like HubSpot, and finally inform the marketing team on the messaging channel. Now, so far, how we've been using LLMs when it comes to a task like this is that you'd probably enable LLM assistance for the drafting of the email part. So you'd probably enter some details about what email you're drafting, what are the details you want to include, and structural instructions that you want. And you would get an email draft from the LLM as a response over which you can start working before you send the email. Now, what if I tell you that instead of doing this, what if you are able to send a prompt that says, send a promotional email about our August sale to the VIP customer list, schedule it for Friday 10 a.m. and notify the marketing team on Slack once it's done. So when you send in this prompt, what we are looking to do is actually have the LLM enable this entire workflow that I have over here, not just with drafting the email, but also choosing the contact list, scheduling the email on HubSpot, and also informing the team on Slack. So what if the LLM is actually able to perform this entire heavy lifting? And just imagine the amount of time it frees in the hands of not just the marketer, but anybody using this tool. And this is what we are looking to achieve with MCPs. So let's actually understand what model context protocols are. So if I had to break it down for you, model refers to a large language model like GPT or Claude, to which we would be sending in the prompt. Context refers to all the information and context that the model needs to understand and act intelligently. So if we were to take the marketer's case, the context would include the tools that it requires to complete the entire workflow like HubSpot or Slack, and also information like the campaign name, email copy, scheduling time, and recipients. And finally, protocol refers to the open standard that governs how this context is passed to the model and how the model interacts with tools and applications to get this done. So with MCPs, models don't just respond, they take action. And because MCP is an open protocol, it can integrate with tools across your entire business stack, from email to CRM, document processing, task management, and the list could go on. That is why MCPs are being seen by top-tier companies around the world today as the next major shift in enterprise AI. And because now you don't just get help from the model, you also get work done by the large language model. So now that we've understood what MCPs are, let's take a very brief look as to how they work from a technical standpoint, because you will require this level of understanding if you're looking to set up document workflows in the MCP environment. So coming right from the beginning, the first step that you would as a user do is enter a prompt. Now this prompt would be handled by a large language model in the MCP environment, also known as the MCP client. Now the client does two things. Firstly, it understands the task being requested. And secondly, it figures out which of the tools is needed for this task to be completed. For instance, if we were to take our older example, it would require the email platform, the messaging app, and also the campaign tool. So once that is done, once the MCP client identifies the tools that are required, it would send a request to the MCP server. Now, MCP servers are lightweight programs that act as the gateway to these external tools. They know how to interact with applications via the MCP protocol, which basically standardizes how tools are being exposed and called. So essentially, the MCP server is what actually connects to and operates the tools on the LLM's behalf, whether it's sending an email, fetching data, posting a message in Slack, and so on. So today, there are growing numbers of MCP servers available that support integrations with popular business tools. You can also build your own custom server to connect with your internal systems as well. And this entire operation runs in the MCP host. So in this webinar, we'll actually be dealing with Claude Desktop. You also have other hosts like Windsurf. Now, up next, we'll be venturing into how the MCP server can actually be set up. But before that, I just wanted to run a quick poll to understand how interested you are in setting up the MCP environment or learning more about it to adopt it in your business. So this shouldn't take more than a minute. So we'd love to see if you are actively exploring MCPs, if you're somewhat curious, or whether you're still learning more about them. All right, so we can see that most of you are quite interested in adopting MCPs in your business, which is interesting to see because this is the next big thing that most businesses are looking out for. All right, so hope you can see the results. All right, so in this webinar, we'll be focusing specifically on the Unstract MCP Server, which brings document extraction capabilities into the MCP ecosystem. That means that Now, within the MCP environment itself, your LLM can now access Unstract to automatically extract data from documents as part of a broader workflow. So before introducing the Unstract MCP server, since we have a couple of you who are completely new to the platform and with us today, I thought I'll quickly venture into a quick Unstract introduction. This shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. So Unstract is an LLM-powered unstructured data ETL platform. If I had to briefly explain the capabilities that the platform comes with, I would have to put it into two major buckets, that is the development phase and the deployment phase. Now, in the development phase is where you would be uploading documents and also mentioning what is the data that you want extracted out of these documents and the schema in which you want this data extracted through the prompts in natural language. So this is done in a prompt engineering environment called Prompt Studio. Over here, you would also first extract the text from your documents and convert it into a format that is LLM consumable, because ultimately LLMs would be working on these prompts and extracting the data from the documents. You also have access to various other capabilities in the Prompt Studio, which could enable better accuracy or save costs. So we will look at this when we cover the demo up next. So once you have developed a Prompt Studio project where you've uploaded a document, you have tested how the data is being extracted, you can then deploy this project in the four deployment options that the platform currently supports, depending on your business use case. So if you were to get your document from an application and then process this document using the prompts you've given in Prompt Studio and then send out the output data to another application, you would probably want to go for an API deployment. You also have ETL pipeline when you're looking to get in the input document from a file system, process it, and send out the output to a database or a data warehouse. Task pipeline is when you're getting the input document from a file system, you process it and send it back to another file system. And finally, we also support human-in-the-loop deployment, because this is also a compliance requirement in many industries that require a manual check to see how the data is actually being extracted. So this is a brief on the capabilities that the platform comes with. To maybe throw out a few numbers that will give you a better idea of where Unstract stands today, we have over 5.5 plus K plus stars on GitHub, 950 plus member Slack community, and currently we are processing over 8 million plus pages per month by paid users alone. So that said, let me venture into the Unstract demo. I'll be switching screens and taking you through what the platform is and how it works. So what you see over here is the Unstract interface. Now, as a first-time user, what you'd have to do is set up certain prerequisites or connectors that you will require for you to perform operations on the platform. So since this is an LLM-driven platform, you have options to set up connectors with various popular LLMs out there. You can see that I have already set up connectors with a few. And you would also have to set up a few vector DBs, embedding models, and finally text extractors. Now, the text extractors over here, one of it is LLM Whisperer, which is also Unstract's in-house text extraction tool. Now, this is a tool that is known to be specifically designed for LLMs so that you're able to extract text from your original documents in a format that is LLM ready. So you will also get to see how this works when I cover a project, a sample project next. So once you set up these connectors, you are good to go, and you can get started with a Prompt Studio project that I was talking about. Now, for the sake of time in this webinar, I'll be getting into an existing project that I have, that is the credit card parser project. So what I have over here is basically a credit card statement that I am processing. And you can see I have a bunch of prompts on the left-hand side which extract different data from this document. So we'll be extracting the customer name, the customer address, spend line items from the statement, as well as the payment information. Now, the first step that is done once your document is uploaded into Prompt Studio is to extract the text from this original document into a format that is LLM ready. So this is done by LLM Whisperer. And you can see how the text has been extracted while preserving the original layout. Now, this layout preservation of LLM Whisperer could be considered as the secret sauce behind the tool's success, because LLMs consume information very much like humans do. So it makes sense only to retain the original formatting of your documents so that your LLMs are able to accurately extract text from them. So you can see even details as small as the logo have been preserved while maintaining the spacing. And this is how it looks once you extract the text. And this is basically the version that you'll be sending to the LLM for for data extraction. So once this is done, and you can check this out under the raw view, you can start defining the prompts that would throw light on the different data that you're looking to extract from this particular document. So in this case, for instance, I'm looking to extract the customer name. And I've also given instructions on what is the schema for this extraction. So I want the first letter of each name to be capitalized. So similarly, you can see in the second prompt, I have a JSON that I want as the output. I've also given instructions on how I want this to be structured. And you also have various output options for you to choose from, different data type for your output to be in. So this is what is possible in Prompt Studio. And I'm just briefly running through this. Actually, you have access to more other capabilities over here under Prompt Studio settings. So these are all accuracy enabling or cost saving features, which are available on the documentation. And we've actually done specific webinars on these features as well. So I'll ask my team to drop the links to those webinars and documentation in chat, so you can check it out when you have the time. So this is what the Prompt Studio can do overall. And you can also upload multiple documents for you to check out how this works. So in this case, we are looking at the credit card statement for American Express. So if I just had to show you how another statement would look, you can see that we have a different credit card statement. And even though it's from a different bank and it has a different layout altogether, the output is again being extracted perfectly well. And the prompts are generic in nature, so you don't have to alter the prompts for each of your documents just because the layout changes. So this would wrap up the capabilities under Prompt Studio that I wanted to go into today. So once you're happy with this project, you can export this as a tool, and you would have to deploy this tool in one of the 4 deployment options we've spoken about. For instance, over here, we are deploying an API. So the input configuration is an API, the output configuration is an API. And all you have to do is basically, you have all the exported tools available over here in the tools pane. So you just have to drag and drop the required tool that you need into the workflow chain over here. So in this case, we just have one tool, but you can create complex workflows by dragging and dropping more number of tools as required. So this is an API deployment. And once this is deployed, you can check this out under API deployments. You have an endpoint over here and also a downloadable Postman collection that you can use. So similarly, if I had to set up an ETL pipeline, my input configuration would be a file system, and we've given the same tool over here. And you can see that I've also specified a database to which I want the output data to go. So this is how you would deploy the Prompt Studio project. And that wraps up what we wanted to cover today, to give you a quick idea of what the platform does. So now let's go back to the presentation, and we'll now see how the Unstract MCP server works and how this could be deployed in the MCP environment. Now, the deployment options that you had seen earlier could be useful for pretty straightforward use cases. But in enterprise environments, document workflows are rarely that simple. You might need more complex routing, advanced orchestration, and coordination across multiple tools in order to complete the end-to-end document extraction cycle. So that is where these traditional deployment methods might fall short. So in order to fit into these advanced scenarios, Unstract provides ways to do this. One way is that you can actually implement Unstract in agentic workflows like NA10, that we've actually done a webinar separately on that. And the other one that we're currently supporting is MCP, which is also being rapidly adopted and looked into. So we'll see how MCPs offer the flexibility and the intelligence to basically connect to multiple tools and easily get started with workflows and complete tasks. So currently, we're also offering a separate MCP server for LLM Whisperer, because LLM Whisperer is also available as a standalone tool. So now let's take a look at what are these use cases that would probably call for an Unstract MCP server or an LLM Whisperer MCP server. So in this webinar, I've taken a real world example, which is quite complex. So we would be parsing invoices in this webinar. And just to give you a quick idea of the problem statement that we are dealing with, let's say that an enterprise is processing multiple invoices per day. So if you were not to automate this, if this was being done manually, you would be receiving these invoices in unstructured formats. It could be time consuming for manual data entry. It would be difficult to prioritize high urgent or high value invoices, and worse, these urgent or high value invoices could actually fall through and you might not be able to get to them within the due date or within time. So you also risk that. And let's see how the workflow is designed to actually handle the challenges that you've just seen. So in this workflow, I've basically designed it to get invoices from the email or the inbox. And what we will be doing next is download all the invoices received via email. And if these invoices are valid, it would be sent to an Unstract API that extracts the required invoice data. So this could be data like the invoice number, the vendor name, the due date, the due amount, and so on. So just to show you what exactly we are looking to extract, let me take you over to the Unstract Prompt Studio project, which will be deployed as an API in this space. So what you see over here is basically the Prompt Studio project, which which I will be deploying as an API in the MCP environment as well. So you have the prompt over here. We are extracting invoice number, the invoice date, due date, vendor details, the total amount, the invoice status, and so on. So this is basically the various data that we're collecting. And we would also be populating a Google Sheet for each day with the vendor name, the vendor ID, the due amount, as well as the due date. So once we extract the data, this sheet would be populated. And moving on from there, we would be creating a new column on the sheet to calculate the days until the invoice is due. And depending on that, if the days until the invoice is due is less than 3 days, the finance team would be messaged on Slack, and this invoice would be marked as urgent. If the due amount is, let's say, greater than $9K, then a separate manager's channel would be notified. And finally, if there are any missing values or errors in the invoice, an error channel will also be notified. So this entire workflow is designed to be run in the MCP environment. We'll be using Claude Desktop, as I mentioned earlier. So for this to run, we would be using the Zapier MCP server for Google Sheets, Gmail, and Slack, and the Unstract MCP server for accessing the Unstract tool. So this again gives you an overview of how this setup is done. So again, we're hosting on Claude Desktop. The MCP client in this case is Claude Sonnet 4. And the MCP servers we're using is the Unstract MCP server, as I mentioned earlier, to access Unstract in the MCP environment. And for the other tools that I have over here, which is Gmail, Google Sheets, and Slack, we'll be again using the Zapier MCP server. So that said, let's move on into the demo. All right, so what you have over here is basically the Claude Desktop, and I have a couple of chats. So this is where I have already run the invoice extraction, since we were processing batches of invoices. And to save up on time during this session, I already have it run over here. So what you could do is explore the settings. And this is where, maybe under the developer feature, this is where I have set up the various tools and the servers that are running. So you have the file system server over here to access the local files. The LLM Whisperer server, MCP server is also set up, as well as the Unstract MCP server. So you can always check this out over here. And so moving back, you also have the various tools that are available that you can see over here in the tools pane. So currently, we've also integrated along with Unstract, LLM Whisperer, and File System, we've also integrated with Zapier, which would offer various tools from Slack. So each of these tools would perform a specific function. So right from creating a private channel to retrieving messages to deleting messages, you have special functions for each of these actions. And we've integrated with Google Sheets. So you have various functions for that as well, with Google Drive, and finally with Gmail. So these are the different tools that I've integrated with using the Zapier MCP server. So let's go through the prompt and how I've been able to implement the workflow that we'd just taken a look at. So the first prompt that I have over here is download the attachments from all the emails as PDFs and which were received in my inbox today, and we are storing it in a specific folder on the system. So you can see how Claude is actually giving you a step-by-step narrative on how it went about performing this particular action. And you can also inspect each of these actions and the responses that Claude has given to you. So this is possible for each of these stages. You can see that it is first reading the email and then downloading the attachments in the email in case they are actually invoices. And you can see that it has finally given you a result that 4 invoices were found, and each of them have been downloaded into the local system. So let me just take you to the email and I'll show you what these invoices are as well. So you can see that I have 4 emails over here in my inbox, and these are the invoices that we had given. So these are sample invoices that we had created for the webinar. You can see that some of them would be, their value would be greater than $9,000, so that those invoices would actually have to go and fall into the manager Slack channel. Some of them would be due, some of them would have missing data. For in this case, you have the due date missing. You could have the due date in less than 3 days. And yeah, so that over here we have the total amount greater than $9K. So this is the invoice that should ideally go into the manager's channel. And over here we have the due date that is due in less than 3 days. All right. So that said, let me go back to the chat over here. And once you have all these documents saved into your system, we are then calling the Unstract tool as well as the LLM Whisperer tool to process each of these invoices downloaded. So you can again inspect the response for each of these and how it has actually worked. So you can see how the data has been extracted as text across each of these documents when you take a look at the response that is given by the Unstract tool. And finally, once the data is extracted as you want it across all the 4 documents, you get a summary of the data that was extracted over here. So moving on from here, I'd given another prompt. So this is the part where we create the Google Sheet and also add the relevant data items. So over here, I've specified that it should create a Google Sheet with today's date as the name. And the data items that would be added would be the invoice number, the vendor name, the due date, as well as the due amount. And we're also giving appropriate column names for each of these columns. And finally, if any values are missing, we're again marking that particular cell as null. And finally, we're also adding another column to the sheet. So I'm asking it to perform the function and calculate the days until which the invoice is due based on the current date. So again, you can inspect each of the actions performed by the LLM. So the Google Sheets tool is now being called. You can see that it's created a spreadsheet over here. And next, it's updating the rows in this particular spreadsheet. And each of this is also given along with narratives so that you are able to understand what the model is doing with respect to this particular task. So once the Google Sheet is created, you also get the sheet URL over here that you can open. And just to show you how this looks, let me take you to the Google Sheet that I had created. So since I had run this yesterday, we have yesterday's date over here. And we have the 4 columns that I'd asked for. So we have the invoice number, the vendor name, as well as the due date and the due amount. And you can see the days until due is also calculated. So once this is done, we will next be performing the function where we send out the notifications to the different teams on Slack. So we're asking the model to consider all of the amount to be in dollars. And if the amount is greater than $9K, then it should be sent to the invoice manager Slack channel saying that a new invoice is received. And if the days until due is less than 3 days, then a message should be sent marking the invoice as urgent to the invoice finance team. And if any of the data like the vendor name, the due date, or the due amount is missing, then this would be reported to the invoice error channel. So once I set this, I'm also finally downloading the Google Sheet that was created, and it would be sent to the invoice finance team Slack channel along with the message today's invoices. So you can see how this is again being, we call the Slack tool for this, and this entire process is being done automatically. And if I just had to show you how this reflects on Slack, we have the invoice manager Slack channel over here. And you can see that I've gotten a notification that a new invoice has been received along with the due amount, the days until this invoice is due, and the invoice number. So similarly, we have other notifications for previously received invoices over here. Under the invoice finance team channel, we again have urgent invoices notified. And finally, we also have the report that is sent in this channel as well, which gives you an idea of all the invoices received on a particular day. So you can see that the model is also giving you a summary of what were the invoices and what is actually present in this report. And finally, in the invoice error channel, you can see that we've gotten notification on a particular invoice where the date was missing. And we also have intimation on which of the values was missing, which is the due date. So this is basically what you can perform using the MCP environment. And in this case, I don't really have to log into any of the platforms that we just saw. So I don't have to manually log into Slack or Google Sheets or my Gmail account. All I have to do is enter prompts. It's as easy as that. And this entire process is done automatically. So this is the benefit that we're looking to get with the MCP environment. And this is what we are actually heading towards next. So that brings me to the end of the demo segment. Let me move back to the presentation. So as a final note to wrap up, MCPs are not just a tool, they actually are now representing a fundamental shift in how we interact with AI. So by bringing orchestration capabilities into large language models, MCPs are now allowing you to move beyond isolated prompts. And this actually means faster processing, fewer manual handoffs, and also tighter integration with business systems. Because currently you might have LLMs working separately with different business apps, but how do you bring this all together in one hood? So that is what MCP makes really easy, where it's able to bring together fragmented integrations that you might have running separately. And as any ecosystem around MCP evolves, this is also at an early stage. So it's a unique opportunity to shape the standards, build future-ready infrastructure, and also stay ahead of the curve. So that said, we've arrived at the conclusion of this webinar. To configure the Unstract MCP server, you can access our detailed documentation guide. Now, the Unstract MCP server runs inside a Docker container. So any local file system paths must be mounted into Docker for the server to access them. And you have the code given over here. You'll have to enter the Unstract API key for the relevant Prompt Studio project that you're looking to deploy, as well as the URL endpoint. All right, thank you, folks. Looks like we don't have any questions left. Thank you so much for joining this webinar today. It was great to have you, and we really look forward to having you at our upcoming events as well. Thank you so much.